The 46th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council opened on Monday. Protesters gathered in Myanmar's biggest cities answering a call for general strike. Iran announced it would stop voluntary implementation of the International Atomic Energy Agency's additional protocol. Hello. During his opening speech at the 46th session of the Human Rights Council, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, referred to the challenge that COVID-19 posed to the humanity.
COVID-19 has loomed over the planet. The pandemic has highlighted the links that unite the great human family, but also those that link human rights and other diversity, social, civil, economic. COVID-19 has not only widened the divergences that separate us, it has aggravated vulnerabilities and reinforced inequalities, but it has also opened new lines of failure, including in terms of human rights. The violations multiplied to end up forming a vicious circle. There are hundreds of millions of families who have seen their lives collapse due to the loss of employment, accumulation of debts, or falling income. The pandemic has affected women disproportionately, as well as minorities, the elderly, people with disabilities, refugees, migrants, and indigenous peoples. Years of progress on gender equality have been wiped out.
The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, mentioned the consequences of the unilateral coercive measures that the United States and its partners have imposed against his country.
Our homeland faces a multidimensional war. The purpose is to end the social model built by the Bolivarian Revolution. The actions of exercise pressure and persecution against our country through the imposition of more than 450 unilateral and illegal coercive measures, which have resulted in a blockade and an obsessive persecution against the capacities of the Venezuelan state and society. By means of these so-called sanctions, Venezuela has been deprived of at least $30 billion in cash which belong to this country, although they are abroad. Those resources should and must be dedicated to the health services, food supply, and rights of our people. The kidnappers of the assets and resources of the Venezuelan state have shown great cruelty, even in circumstances of pandemic, highlighting and disregarding the calls of the international community, the Secretary General of the United Nations, the High Commissioner, and especially the Venezuelan people, and they have increased the economic aggressions, causing an intentional and premeditated humanitarian crisis.
President Nicolas Maduro said that his government will continue to collaborate with the United Nations agencies in an environment of respect for sovereignty and the dignity of Venezuela.
I reiterate that the Venezuelan state will work decisively with the actors of the Human Rights Council. We ratify that we will not accept the interference or intervention of any inquisitorial mechanism against our country that pretend to use the just cause of human rights as a political tool for a change of government and a change of regime by force in our country. Those who believe that Venezuela will diminish the cooperation achieved with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights as a consequence of these ideological provocations of a group of governments are mistaken.
A Nigerian Air Force passenger plane has crashed just outside the international airport in Abuja due to engine failure, killing 7 people on board. A spokesperson for the Air Force said the Beechcraft King Air B350I crashed while attempting to return to the airport after reporting engine failure en route to the city of Myanmar. Videos posted to social media show the water cannons being used to extinguish the flames at the scene, while a large number of onlookers crowded around. Violence is still across South Sudan a year after a peace deal was signed to end a civil war that began in 2013, UN report said on Friday. Attacks by armed groups against civilians intensified. During fighting in 5 states. South Sudan, one independent. We're back. Protesters gathered in Myanmar, biggest city on Monday, despite the ruling junta's attorney veiled threat to use lethal force in people answered a call for general strike opposing military takeover 3 weeks ago. Outside the Hilden Center in Yangon, the usual gathering place for protesters to begin their rallies, the crowd swelled more than 1,000. The crowds were gathering after supporters of the civil disobedience movement, the group leading the resistance, called for people to unite on Monday for a spring revolution. Shops and workplaces in Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, were shut on Monday as people were there answered the call for general strike. It is part of the civil disobedience campaign to fight against the military junta. Thousands of people rallied in the capital's wide boulevards, among many on motorbikes, to be able to perform in a swift movement in the event of any police action.
I'm joining the nationwide protest as a citizen of the country. We must join the protest in this moment without fail, so I've closed down my factory and joined the demonstration.
I am joining the protest to fight against the junta. We don't want to be governed by the regime. It is not worth working for the sake of a group of people. We will fight against them until we win. I'll join the protests every day.
In Mandalay, protesters flooded the streets to support calls for a general strike, refusing to be intimidated by threats from the ruling junta. Thousands of demonstrators packed into the city center to listen to speeches and pledge their determination to overturn the military junta and reinstall civilian governments. Workers, like railway workers, truckers, and many civil servants, have joined the civil disobedience campaign. UN Step Human Rights Body opened its first top-level meeting on Monday amid growing concerns issues like the arrest of Russian opposition leader, the rights situation in countries like Ethiopia and Sri Lanka, the military coup in Myanmar.
Today, I call on the Myanmar military to stop the repression immediately, release the prisoners, end the violence, respect human rights and the will of the people expressed in recent elections. Coups have no place in our modern world. I welcome the resolution of the Human Rights Council pledge to implement your request and express my full support to the people of Myanmar in their pursuit of democracy, peace, human rights, and rule of law.
Thousands of people were being evacuated on the outskirts of Indonesia's capital Jakarta on Monday amid flooding after the Citarium River embankment broke. Rescuers from the National Search and Rescue Agency have been deployed. Spokesperson for the National Disaster Mitigation Agency said more than 28,000 residents in 4 villages in Bekase district and 34 villages in Karawang district were affected by the floods. Nearly 4,200 people were being evacuated. Thousands of houses in the area were covered with 100 of 250 centimeters of water and were without power.
I saw that there were several embankments that had broken down. Not only river embankments, but also many irrigation canal embankments whose water levels had overflowed due to the water discharge entering the Citarium tributary that had reached 900 cubic meters per second.
On Monday, Japan called on the international community to support its claim to a group of disputed islands that are currently controlled by South Korea.
Takeshima is clearly Japanese territory under international law, even in light of historical facts. In order to solve the Takeshima problem, it is important to obtain the correct understanding of the international community, and the government has been strengthening such measures, specifically communicating through Japanese embassies around the world, dispatching domestic experts overseas, inviting foreign journalists to Japan, and we also create, distribute, and share videos and pamphlets in 11 different languages, including English and French.
We'll take a short break now. A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto net.
Dot in the I. Saturday, only on teleSUR. Welcome back. The Iranian government has reached a deal with the International Atomic Energy Agency to continue to provide access to its inspectors for the next 3 months, potentially laying the groundwork for Washington and Tehran to kickstart nuclear talks. IAEA Director General Grossi said Sunday that the two sides had reached a temporary technical understanding following his trip to Iran.
As of tomorrow, voluntary compliance with the additional protocol will be halted. Some of the necessary surveillance that the International Atomic Energy Agency has requested for the period of next 3 months within the framework of Iran's safeguard commitments will remain in place. Over the next 3 months, cameras that are running in accordance with the commitments beyond the safeguards will remain switched on, but their footage won't be handed over to the agency. They will be kept by Iran's Atomic Energy Organization for the next 3 months. Practically, we are stopping voluntary implementation of the additional protocol, and what has been agreed with the IAEA is in line with the law passed by the Iranian parliament. What is obvious is that as long as the United States has not lifted the sanctions, it is not in a position to be a part of the nuclear deal and cannot be present in the talks between the 3 European countries and Iran. We are reviewing our response to the European Union proposal for an informal meeting between current members of the Tehran 2015 nuclear deal and the United States.
In the Gaza Strip, the COVID-19 vaccination campaign is underway with the Russian-made Sputnik V vaccine. Both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority have accused Israel of violating international law by stemming the free flow of vaccines into Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry announced on Wednesday that the Gaza Strip had received its first shipment of 2,000 COVID-19 vaccines, destined to cover 0.05% of its population. Health Minister Mai Al-Kaila said the vaccines are destined for frontline health care staff working in emergency departments and intensive care units treating coronavirus patients. Malaysia has received its first shipment of vaccines with initial doses ready to be administered by the middle of the week. A Malaysia Airlines cargo aircraft carrying some 312,000 doses of Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccines landed at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport on Sunday. Malaysia is planning to vaccinate at least 80% of its 32 million people, with the program covering 3 phases starting this month before ending in February 2022. Malaysia has so far secured access to a supply of 66.7 million doses of various vaccines, including 32 million from Pfizer and BioNTech.
Today, the first delivery of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine has arrived and landed in Malaysia, amounting to 312,390 doses. This is the first delivery, and we will receive the second delivery on the 26th. After this, we will receive every 2 weeks until we receive our entire order from Pfizer. This is just from Pfizer. We have not yet announced the other vaccines.
Colombia has received its first batch of COVID-19 vaccines developed by Chinese pharmaceutical company Sinovac. According to the Health Ministry, some of the newly arrived shots will be used for mass vaccinations in regions threatened by the coronavirus variant first discovered in Brazil. The ministry also assured that the jab does not have extreme requirements for transportation or storage temperatures and is therefore suitable for delivery to remote areas.
Because Colombia prepared for many months to have a consistent and coherent vaccination plan, with logistics, with human resources, with the cold chain. And we have already seen that in the first few days we have already vaccinated more than 30,000 people, and will be growing next week, and so on until we reach the goal of vaccinating 35 million Colombians, to reach 70% of the population, and thus the dream of achieving collective immunity.
Some 200,000 doses of China's Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine have arrived in Mexico as well. Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard has said the nation is also administering vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and AstraZeneca. Furthermore, he said an additional 10 million doses of Sinovac are expected to arrive in the next few weeks. We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Ray Gomez. Thank you for watching.